people come to the mountains to explore its natural beauty and wonder. The steep terrain of mountain peaks offers breathtaking vistas, with wildlife and recreation, including whitewater rafting and fresh powder skiing. The mountains may be majestic and inviting, but flying in them can be extremely hazardous, particularly if pilots aren't prepared, if they have not received the proper training for mountain flying. This is an actual crash, shot from a small airplane just before it impacted, killing the two on board. It's an example of how a slight miscalculation can be fatal.
All right.
Hello, I'm Mike Silva. For the past 20 years, I have been a television helicopter pilot and meteorologist for both NBC and CBS in Denver, Colorado. I've reported on all too many crashes like the one you have just seen. In almost every case, the cause has been pilot error. I've flown over 1,300 combat hours in Vietnam and even survived being shot down twice. But none of that came close to preparing me for mountain flying. The purpose of this program is to show you some of the problems unique to mountain flying and to encourage you to take a recognized mountain flying course before you fly in the high country.
During this program, we'll cover some of the key issues you as a pilot must be aware of before you fly the mountains. This includes density altitude, which can drastically reduce your plane's performance. Weather conditions, which can change within minutes in the high country. Aircraft operation, from setting the proper fuel-to-air mixture to preventing loss of control. CFIT, controlled flight into terrain. And pilot decision-making.
We have quite a bit of mountain obscurement in northern Colorado. You might want to consider going south, west toward Gunnison, Monarch Pass, maybe up through Montrose and up.
Many of the decisions you make while on the ground are as important as those you will make in the air. Before leaving on your mountain flight, you're encouraged to visit or phone one of the FAA's automated flight service stations.
Hi, I'm Tracy.
I'm Ray.
Nice to meet you.
What can we do for you?
I'm flying to Grand Junction today.
Okay.
The AFSS will provide you with all the latest weather information for your trip.
You want to know what the weather's going to be like?
Yeah.
Okay. As you can see on the satellite photos, not a whole lot going on except in the central mountains.
It's important for you to file a flight plan with the FAA so that you can be entered into the computer system and automatically monitored.
Okay, your flight plan's on file.
When you file and activate your flight plan, that's your guarantee that someone's going to be looking for you if you don't arrive at your destination. If you don't arrive within 30 minutes of your ETA, we begin the process of searching for your aircraft.
Trying to locate a missing aircraft that didn't file a flight plan is like trying to find a needle in a haystack.
We had an Air Force jet that crashed in 1997 in the mountains of western Colorado. This crash actually occurred at the High Altitude Army Aviation Training Site's training area. We had national level assets. We had Air Force and Army personnel. It still took us 19 days to find this crash. You can imagine how long it would take for us to find a light aircraft that did not file a flight plan.
Right there it is.
There are numerous aircraft still missing in the mountains of the United States.
Right there, that's the hole where it burned, right there.
When you are flying in the mountains, the weight of your aircraft is critical. That's why you should never carry more fuel than you need to reach your destination, plus a 1-hour reserve. In loading your airplane, remember the weight limit in the mountains should never exceed 90% of your aircraft's gross weight. In other words, for this 3,100-pound gross weight aircraft, the maximum weight limit would be 2,800 pounds. So whenever possible, pack light and carry fewer passengers. Check the weight and balance section of your pilot's operating handbook for the proper loading and weight distribution procedures. The way you pack and distribute weight in your aircraft is critical. If you do it wrong, it's possible your airplane may not take off. Or even worse, it may not be able to recover from a stall situation. Remember, you are going to be flying in the mountains, and the power and performance of your aircraft will be drastically reduced from what you are used to at sea level.
If I'm going to be flying in the mountains, I'm going to reduce my gross weight at least 10%. That'll give me better maneuverability and better performance.
If you started out near sea level, but land at a high-altitude airport such as those in the area of Denver, your engine will be operating at reduced power in the thin air. And if the air is warm, the power will be reduced even more. So give yourself plenty of runway and closely monitor your rate of descent. Here is an example of a pilot who didn't compensate for the density altitude. He touched down much farther down the runway than he had intended, and actually ran out of runway. We'll discuss more about density altitude later.
I think engine leaning is one of the most critical elements that a lot of pilots forget when coming into high elevation airports or mountain flying. Out in the high mountainous areas, some of our field elevations out here run as high as 12,000, 13,000 feet, which in some cases exceeds the engine surface ceiling. So without proper engine leaning and fuel-to-air mixture ratios, the engine cannot achieve its top performance.
If you are taking off from an airport above 4,000 feet, it's important to properly lean your engine. Remember, if you are used to sea level, this is like cruising at 4,000 feet above sea level. After all the normal pre-takeoff checks are completed, the fuel-to-air mixture must be set. First, taxi your aircraft into the wind. Come to a stop and hold the brakes. Set to full throttle. Then pull the mixture control out. Keep your eye on your tachometer. You will know you have reached the right power setting when you see an increase in the RPMs. If equipped, monitor your EGT gauge. Remember to follow the aircraft manufacturer's recommendations for proper leaning procedures. Once you are in the air, you must adjust the mixture by leaning each 2,000 feet during your climb. And when you are landing, remember to enrich the mixture. Before you take off, you should be aware that density altitude is a deceptive phenomenon that will drastically affect your aircraft's performance. The warmer the temperature, the thinner the air. That means there's less air for the propeller to pull. The wings will produce less lift, and the engine will have less air to breathe. The takeoff may be a little tricky, because the altitude of the airstrip will seem much higher. For example, at 90 degrees on a runway at a 6,000-foot altitude, the density altitude will be the equivalent of 9,200 feet. That means you are going to require twice as much runway to take off.
Here at Leadville, Colorado, where the airport is essentially 10,000 feet above sea level, on a warm day, the density altitude could be 13,000 to 14,000 feet, and that's higher than the surface ceiling of most light airplanes.
How will your aircraft perform at high altitudes? Check your pilot's operating handbook or an FAA-approved flight manual for a density altitude chart. Remember, all of your engine performance specifications are usually based on normal temperatures at sea level. Once you are in the air, your density altitude problem is not over. You have to clear numerous passes in the mountains.
I fly early in the morning because of high density altitude problems in the afternoon because of the higher temperature. So I fly early in the morning when it's nice and cool.
To avoid density altitude problems, training courses for mountain flying recommend that you avoid flying in the mountains during the hottest part of the day, between the hours of 10 a.m. and 5 p.m. Your rate of climb may be 500 feet per minute from sea level, but in the mountains, your climb could be reduced to as little as 120 feet per minute, and it's entirely possible that the terrain will be rising faster than your aircraft. That means you'll have to circle or perform a shuttle climb to reach a safe altitude above the pass you are approaching. You'll notice here how the pilot is banking to the left to make the climb. After a few circuits, he will be high enough to safely cross. You should fly at least 1,000 feet above the mountain pass you are crossing. You should also be at least 1,000 feet higher than the mountain pass or peak you are approaching when you are 3 miles away from it. If there are clouds in the sky, you should remain at least 1,000 feet below them. If you can't see the terrain on the other side of the pass you are approaching, you are flying too low to clear the pass. You are about to witness an actual crash that occurred in Colorado.
Very pretty little lake.
As you can hear in the background, the pilot and his passenger were so preoccupied by the beautiful scenery that no one noticed that the airplane was not climbing fast enough to clear the rising terrain. The pilot could have banked left and made a shuttle climb to a safe altitude. Instead, he turned to the right and tried to climb. Because of the higher altitude and the decreased performance of the aircraft, he didn't have enough power. The aircraft went into a stall spin. Both on board died, and because they had not filed a flight plan, it was years before they were recovered.
You really start to realize how important it is to have a proper training before flying in such different conditions. Airplane flew completely different than you thought it would, didn't it?
A recognized mountain flying training program will show you how to avoid loss of control problems. It's important for you to know the terrain where you are flying. Check your sectional aeronautical charts and notice how the higher terrains are illustrated by darker shades. The mountain pass we are approaching could have turbulence. We are going to begin crossing at a 45-degree angle. That will give us plenty of room to turn around if we get into trouble. As you approach a pass, formulate a plan to make a quick escape. Make sure that the area where you will turn is a lower altitude than the pass. If you try to approach a pass head-on and you run into trouble, you may not have enough altitude or maneuverability to turn around. We are now crossing the pass. There is turbulence, but since we are 1,000 feet higher than the pass, the turbulence is not a threat. Notice as we clear the pass, we turn at a 90-degree angle. This enables us to depart the pass and any other unexpected turbulence quicker. Even though you may be flying 1,000 feet higher than the mountain pass, you can still experience turbulence. When flying in rough air, you should reduce the aircraft speed to 1.7 times your stall speed. That means if your stall speed is 50 miles per hour, your rough air speed would be 85 miles per hour. For maneuvering speed, you should fly about double your stall speed, or follow the recommended speed in your POH. As you fly through valleys, remember not to fly down the middle. Fly to one side or the other to give yourself more room to make a 180-degree turn, should the need arise. Fly on the updraft side of the valley, which will help during the climb to a pass. Never fly up a narrow canyon or valley, because your airplane may not be able to climb as fast as the terrain rises, and there may not be enough room to make a 180-degree turn between the valley walls.
What I like to tell students is if you're going to fly the canyons, make sure you know what's going across the canyon, and is there an exit out the other end.
It's important for you to be aware of wind direction. If you have difficulty determining the wind direction, remember you can look at the cloud shadows on the ground. As you can see from this illustration, wind velocity increases as it is channeled through a narrow pass. As wind flows up a mountain slope, it carries moisture with it and forms clouds. In stable conditions, this forms cap clouds and fog. Cap clouds can obscure the mountain tops. You should not attempt to fly in these conditions. Watch for strong winds at mountaintops, which cause mountain waves. The top of a mountain wave may have a lenticular cloud. Below the lenticular cloud at lower levels, a rotor cloud may be present. Within this area may be severe turbulence. Turbulence on the lee side of a pass will be much greater than on the windward side. A sudden downdraft may put your aircraft out of control. As you prepare for your landing, use a standard descent rate of 500 feet per minute. Your approach is important. You may have to get it right the first time, because at many mountain airports, the terrain doesn't allow for go-arounds. If terrain permits, you should start your descent 3 miles away from the airport when you are 1,000 feet above the airport's elevation. Fly the recommended traffic pattern. Your gear will be down and your flaps down approximately by half. At the halfway point, 1.5 miles from the airport, the flaps will be set for approach and landing. The airspeed should stabilize at 1.3 times the stall speed. Your aim point should have been selected and the touchdown point determined. Your landing checklist should be completed as you continue to monitor your rate of descent. Weather conditions in the mountains can change rapidly.
Well, we just came back from Aspen. It was a great flight. Weather was good. Air was calm and smooth, no turbulence.
Even if you rely on a pilot report for conditions at a particular pass, the conditions could be entirely different by the time you reach it.
We get quick changes in the weather here due to the effects of the mountain range that's fairly close. So you have to keep an eye out, especially in the afternoons where we have quick storms that come up and shifting winds.
Nanza 266 Sierra, Denver Flight Watch. Aspen forecast after 2000 Zulu. Thunderstorms, light rain.
It doesn't matter if you are in the mountains or closer to sea level. Weather is one of the biggest factors involved in general aviation accidents. When you are approaching a situation like this, where clouds are covering the tops of the mountains, the results can be disastrous. If you don't have an instrument rating, you should turn back. But remember, an instrument rating is only as good as the pilot's ability to interpret weather information.
When you see conditions like that, you need to find a safe place to sit down and check into a motel because you're not going to be going anywhere until the weather clears up.
The winds were howling, the snow blowing.
This crash occurred in the dead of winter, when wind turbulence can be severe. In this case, the pilot and his airplane were no match for the severe weather.
And where we got caught in a downdraft.
Everyone on board survived, but the crash emphasizes a common problem among pilots.
Chris says he's been flying since '81, but was unfamiliar with the mountainous terrain.
It all comes down to good pilot decision-making. Decisions that pilots make on the ground are often as important as decisions made during a flight. Have you developed your own personal minimums checklist for mountain flying? A responsible pilot should strongly consider canceling any planned flight where instrument meteorological conditions exist, if darkness will fall before the flight can be completed, if winds are forecast at more than 30 knots at mountaintops, or if there are unsuitable airport conditions at the destination airport or at the alternate airport. Many times pilots crash when they are in complete control of their aircraft. It's a situation referred to as controlled flight into terrain, known as CFIT. CFIT is listed as the cause in nearly 1 out of 5 general aviation accidents. It occurs because the pilot has either lost his or her orientation, is unaware of the situation, or is getting bad information. Many CFIT crashes could be eliminated with proper planning and situational awareness. This crash occurred at night in Colorado. The pilot flew directly into the terrain. He was apparently confused about his location. Never take off or land in areas in which you are unfamiliar.
Okay, Sue, you get your weather briefing?
Always get a briefing from an experienced local pilot. Most CFIT accidents occur on approach. Not because the pilot strays, most were right on course, but because they didn't manage their descent properly. 1/2 of the CFIT accidents occur on instrument approaches.
You want to have your airplane configured and have a nice stabilized approach.
The use of a stabilized approach, either VFR or IFR, will reduce this type of accident.
I've been flying in the mountains since the 1950s. There's absolutely no reason for a CFIT accident in the mountains. It's simple. If you can't see where you're flying, don't fly. And if you aren't familiar with the area, don't go.
The proper mountain flying training course can teach you how to fly a stabilized approach in the mountains. These same basic techniques can also be translated into flat land approaches. Again, the key to all of these scenarios is pilot decision making. Along with this videotape, you received a flight checklist to help you before and during your mountain flight. Helpful information is outlined in a mountain flying pamphlet, which is available from your safety program manager at your local Flight Standards District office.
The FAA does not certify mountain training programs, but we certainly recommend that you complete a mountain flying course prior to flying in the mountains.
As you have seen, flying the mountains is a completely different experience from what you may be used to, with several factors becoming critical to your safety, such as density altitude, that deceptive phenomenon that will drastically affect your aircraft's performance. Weather conditions, which can change without warning in the mountains. Aircraft operation, including setting the right fuel-to-air mixture to preventing loss of control. CFIT, controlled flight into terrain. And pilot decision-making, both on the ground and in the air. As we have said, this program is not designed to teach you how to fly in the mountains, but rather to encourage you to take a recognized mountain flying course before your trip. Most of the courses can be completed in a single day. So as you plan your trip to the mountains, be sure to schedule your mountain flying course. You'll see a list of some of the organizations offering the courses at the conclusion of this program.
What you have just seen represents a few examples of what you should look for and look out for while flying in the high country. While mountain flying can be extremely dangerous, it can also be a safe and rewarding experience provided you receive the proper training. Don't take a chance. Take a mountain flying course.